And so Section 6 looks at the obligations of the NDSA, so how we are to treat you and how we're supposed to run our organisation. And so we want to be able to provide stable governance for the NDSA. So we want to make sure that things aren't collapsing and falling apart, that you guys can focus on your mahi and not think about things going on behind the scenes. And we also want to be able to provide guidance for you guys. So if you've got a question, you can ask us and we're able to help you through it. We also need to maintain an annual strategic plan and make these plans available to members. And so those plans are supported through the alumni subcommittee, but ultimately our members are the ones who vote that through, I believe. And so it's really important that we have every year an understanding of what the goals are that we actually want to achieve this year. And so we don't end up losing our direction. We want to maintain the brand of the NDSA. So if you see us posting, you know it's going to be us. Obviously, that depends on what it is, but generally have a brand of the NDSA and that what we provide you is accessible. So it's captioned, it uses good contrast, it follows those WCAG web content accessibility guidelines. We also work with government, tertiary and other organisations on advocacy, representation and our advisory positions to the benefit of our members and disabled learners. So we aren't doing these things just to make money, we aren't doing them just to give ourselves a sounding board, we're doing them so that they benefit you and people at your institution. We want to regularly communicate with you guys in a way that's accessible and considers different communication needs. So we don't just have big old walls of text. We've hopefully got videos to accompany these kinds of changes and things that we want feedback on. We provide you with opportunities for upskilling and participating in your organizations and institutions. So say your institution has a working group and you just don't quite know how to go about it. You've never been on a working group before and there's all these bigwigs in a room and you need a little bit of advice. We want to be able to support you in entering that room and feeling confident in your ability to advocate for other learners' needs at your institution. We also want to provide you with upskilling opportunities, whether that's in person or online, and whether that's online events or recorded tutorials. You've got the ability to, again, grow your confidence and your understanding and to be the best representative you can be. We also want to be able to support members and their organisations to communicate with their institutions. And so if you are having difficulties communicating with your institution, they are throwing up barriers or they're just not cooperating, we want to be able to hold them accountable and help you through those communications. And so whether we're sending them an email on your behalf or we're attending a meeting with you and your institution, we want to make sure that you guys are supported in the ability to communicate. And so 7 talks about the obligations of our members. So what y'all are required to do as a member. And so that's in part because being a member is to a degree a bit of a privilege, right? Currently, because there's only one member per institution, you as a member hold a really good position to represent your students and have your say. But that slot, we want to make sure that we're using that wisely. And so we want to make sure that our members are able to regularly attend things or able to keep up in a way that if we send something out to you, whether that's recording or minutes, you might be able to look over it and give us feedback. Because we're a member-led organisation, contribution from our members and engagement from our members is really, really important to making sure that the NDSA can actually function and run. I would love to be able to push through a constitutional amendment, just get that done, but we need many people to show up to that SGM and make that decision. And that's actually really important because it means that I'm not just going around making silly decisions. without thinking about how they affect others. It means that we are accountable to y'all, but we also need that kind of engagement back. And so members, as a requirement of the Incorporated Societies Act 2022, if there are changes in the contact details, so for example, if your president steps down partway through the year and they change, we need a change of contact details. And those contact details are unfortunately a little bit more than what we would like to obtain. Unfortunately, we're required to by the 2022 Act. But those contact details include a phone number, an email address, and a name. We will not use that phone number unless you want us to. That will be held securely. It will not be available to other members, but unfortunately, it's just a requirement of the new Act. It doesn't actually have to be your phone number. We would be more than happy, for example, if it was the phone number of your disability support services, if you have a close relationship with them, and they're happy to provide theirs as being a contact phone number, especially given that we're not likely to use it. The email could be one that you have. It could be your personal email, but it could also be one set up for your organisation. So say your institution's Disabled Students Association at gmail.com or something like that gets passed through the years. But we essentially need to be able to provide a members list to the Incorporated Societies Registrar. So as a member, you'll also, where possible, attend each of our special general meetings, annual general meetings, and our monthly members council, along with any training hui, whether that's in person or online. And when we say you, if you're an organisational voting member, we mean anyone from your organisation. So say you aren't going to be available that day, or you've got someone who you think is better suited to attending, you're more than welcome to send them in your place. If you're a representative voting member, if you have someone else who is a learner at your institution who you think would be suitable, you're also welcome to send them, provided that they recognise that we may occasionally talk about confidential information and they're able to communicate to you something that you might have missed. If you can't have someone attend, please let us know. So this means that we can know in advance whether or not we're likely to reach quorum. If we've got a meeting and everyone's telling us that they're not going to be able to attend, that means that we can rebook it rather than show up on the day and find out no one's actually able to make it. We also want to make sure that everything's accessible as possible. We want to be able to provide written information about meetings and voting options via forms and emails where we can. And that way you don't necessarily need to be there at the time. And if there are things that you're finding that we're doing is not being done in an accessible way, please let us know and we can try and change that. The NDSA also requests that members or a delegate participates in training and other services that we provide, especially if we've been given funding, where it allows us to really make use of that moment and that time that we've got available. And we're really able to utilize the opportunities that we've been given. And it also means that you can help upskill future executives and other members of your team. We also request that if, for example, you're asked your perspective on something, and especially if it's related to the NDSA, that you let us know and you don't necessarily give out opinions that are said in a way that's on behalf of the NDSA. This just helps to make sure that we're putting out consistent information from the association and helps to make sure that we aren't accidentally misrepresented. But we are also more than happy to work with you in doing this, and we're more than happy to take on feedback, for example, and provide that communication from an NDSA standpoint to, for example, someone giving you a media request. So we don't want to make that list of obligations of our members too long, right? We recognize that you guys also aren't really being paid. There's a good chance you're not being paid at all. We recognize that everyone has so much going on in their home lives and in their study lives, and we want to make sure that everything's done in a way that it doesn't take up too much of your time, but we also really need that member feedback and engagement so that we can make good decisions. And so we also really want to focus on there being benefits to joining the NDSA, right? It's not just we're taking from you. We want to make sure that there are benefits to you. So you get to, for example, have really big parts in the decision-making processes of the NDSA, the direction of the NDSA, our elections, our constitutional changes, and things like that. You get to be a part of the National Disabled Learner Voice, right? So we quite often feed back to other institutions, to organisations and commissions like the Tertiary Education Commission, Ako Aotearoa, Workbridge, a whole bunch of different organisations that impact disabled learners, right? And so we want to make sure that we're gathering your voices and your learners' voices and providing those opinions and perspectives. You can also receive ongoing support and advice in how you do things and receive training from us, whether that's through Members Council or by engaging with us one-on-one. You also get to shape the future voice of the NDSA and the tertiary education system for learners. We also want to make sure that we create opportunities for you to be involved, whether that's in local conferences, getting to know and partake in our operation, in relationship building and networking that we can provide, and in social media. We also want to make sure that you can partake in social events that we provide, and you can choose how involved you are because we need to be mindful of your capacity. And so we want to make sure that you aren't burning yourselves out in this, but that we are providing you these benefits, and that if you want to get involved, you can get as involved as you want. We also might help aid and support you in any conflicts or communications, whether that's with students' associations, your institutions, other members. This helps make sure that y'all are sustainable and you aren't getting burnt out, but also you're supported and cared for. We're happy to help, whether that's in a mediation way, whether that's just being in the room with you, whatever we can do, we really want to make sure that we can help. We also would request that you let us know of concerns and conflicts regarding your internal operations and governance. We can then give you any advice. We can let you know whether we would recommend certain changes or whether we can offer any support and help enable you to make any changes that you need or decisions. And we also just ask that you let us know if there's any conflicts or concerns that arise that might affect our reputation, but also our functioning. So the NDSA, for example, sits on the Aotearoa Tertiary Students Association, and where we sit on that, we work with various other presidents. So if you have a conflict with your Students Association, that may ultimately come up in that space, and it's really helpful for us to know that that's happening so that we can support you through it. Section 9 is a pretty short one. It just basically means it's free to be a member. I don't think we're likely to change this anytime soon. We're more than happy to just continue keeping it free for now. Section 10 just covers any changes to membership agreements. So we review these annually and we make sure that they're still meeting your needs and our needs, but they're also compliant with any potential legislation changes. And so we have you sign these annually because there's a lot of turnover, but also because these membership agreements might change with time. If we find out this year's was rubbish and it just wasn't working, we can make those changes. If we are introducing multiple members per association, we'll have to re-sign these agreements. So we want to do this yearly to keep ourselves up to date, but also to make sure that we're meeting the obligations that we have to the Incorporated Societies Act. If, for example, there are small individual alterations that need to be made, we're happy to make them. We just want to talk to you and agree with you first. If we want to change it outside of the annual review, so say we're making a decision halfway through the year that completely changes how the NDSA operates, we would come into an agreement with you to change these membership agreements and potentially have them re-signed. Now, For the disputes resolution, this mostly has to go in accordance with our constitution, which, as you can see, is currently not linked because we're in the process of changing it. But yeah, we want to make sure that there are processes if you come in with a complaint or a dispute, whether that's about us, about the NDSA as a whole, or another member of the NDSA, we can enter these processes. They have to follow certain rules around natural justice, which can be a little bit complicated, and it can be a little bit tricky to do it in a way that's fair and keeps people safe. And so we're really interested in feedback on that. But yeah, we are bound to an extent by what the Incorporated Societies Act asks of us. And so we don't really talk about disputes resolutions a huge amount in this agreement, simply because they have to be in the Constitution. But if you want to bring any complaints to us, this is where you can do it through the co-president's email, and we will basically process it according to that disputes resolution process. In our Constitution, that should be capitalized. There we go. Liability is another short one. Basically, if we make a mistake in some way, can't really hold us liable financially. I can't really see many ways in which we could cause financial loss or anything like that. But yeah, it's generally, we want to be held accountable, obviously, but it just means that we aren't going through any kind of frivolous disagreements. It also means that you can't, for example, try and take out a loan on behalf of the NDSA. You would be getting approval from us if you were to do that for some weird reason. 13 talks about intellectual property, in which I've made some pretty big changes to how last year's functioned. When it comes to using work produced by the NDSA, especially our logo, please get our permission before doing that. And it just makes sure that we aren't accidentally seen as endorsing something that we didn't know we were endorsing. We also agree not to use your items, your logos, without your written permission or anything that you produce. We don't have this linked as it's currently still being worked on, but we will be forming a members policy, a media policy. This is currently still being worked on, but we will have a media policy which helps to talk specifically about our social media, interviews and public comments. It will include, for example, at our events, we may need to take photos for social media. And so you have the ability to opt out whether that's being blurred or not included in the photo. And so we'd really like to know whether or not you give us permission for those things. And so we'll be putting that in a separate policy so that it can be updated over time and it meets your needs as well. Privacy is another fairly short one, in that we essentially have to do everything in line with the Privacy Act 2020. We'll respect your personal information, we'll hold it securely, we won't ask for more information than we need, so we aren't going to go asking, like, what's your home address and things like that if we don't need it, because that would be a little bit messed up, right? We also agree to handle sensitive information in a way that's really respectful and careful. We aren't leaking your information to other people, we aren't gossiping, we are being basically good guardians of the information that we've been given. If your association's structure changes or you end up passing on to someone else who is a new member, we do ask that locally stored files are transferred to them so that they can come up to date, but also if there's any confidential information on there, that confidential information is only transferred to the people who need to know, and it's transferred out of the care once you're no longer a member. Additionally, if membership agreement is terminated by either party, so you want out or we want out, we may revoke your access to member resources and files, and you agree to delete locally stored files. And this just helps to keep that confidential information safe. Now, you are welcome to terminate membership agreements for any reason. If you feel that we have acted wrongly in some way, you're welcome to go, I no longer wish to be a member. In order to do that, you need to give it to us in writing, and we will give you confirmation of that within the next 7 days. We ask ideally that any notice that you want to terminate this agreement is signed by 2 individuals from your organisation or the NDSA. If you're an organisational member, and I can see how I might need to just edit that one a little bit, but that means that we don't end up in an accidental coup situation where one person is making a decision on behalf of everyone else. We want to make sure that that decision's one that everyone's agreeing to, whichever side that they're on, that multiple people within that association or within that organisation are in agreement that we'd like to terminate our membership. Because membership's renewed annually, if in the following year you don't agree again to be a member, that membership will cease. This is because of this high turnover between our members. We don't always know what each new member will be year to year, and we need to have this up-to-date information for the Incorporated Societies Act. We will try and let you know as many times as we possibly can that we need to renew this membership agreement, and we will let you know if your membership is lapsing. We're not just going to go, hey, you failed to look at this file, you failed to do that, and oops, you ADHD too close to the sun. When we're going to let you know, right? And should, for example, a part of this agreement not comply with the Incorporated Societies Act, basically that section of that agreement just becomes invalid. It no longer counts, but the rest of the agreement's still fine, right? If we have any disagreements, we're going to work with you in good faith about how this membership agreement works. And so Section 18 is just where you sign. So it just says that we all agree to these terms and conditions. It confirms the agreement. And so we have you write down what your organisation is. So let's pretend I'm doing this for Disability at Massey. I would say Disability at Massey. Say I'm the representative, Eloise Fleming. What's my title? I am a student representative at Disability at Massey. My organisation's emails, I actually have one specific, so Disability Auckland. Oh, actually, that's a lie. I've changed it. Eloise at tetera.ac.nz. The email, I would like to receive it at that same email. So I don't need to receive it at my personal one, but if you wanted to receive an email to your personal emails instead of the organisation's one, say it just happens to be the one that you access more, you're more than welcome to do that. The signature's an interesting one. You can sign it in a few different ways. We may end up using an actual form provider that allows you to give your signature in different ways. So I won't quite do that one there. And then what's today is 23rd of the 4th, 2025. And then the NDSA would have an authorised representative. This generally would be the co-president. We could potentially make it the engagement officer as well. Obviously, this won't work because I can't sign both half of the agreements, but that would just be where that is. And then our last part is just this nice little glossary that hopefully gives some more information about what these words mean. So we may occasionally use the word representative in different contexts. So an organisation representative is someone who's working on behalf of your organisation. So that might be your president or one of your team members who has been designated. We talk a little bit about how the representative voting membership structure works and why you might need a representative voting member. So if there's no learner-led organisations in your institution, and so, for example, there is no Disabled Students Association at Clarissa's institution, and they probably don't think they're going to form one. Say the institution's just too small. And so we agree with Clarissa that they'll act as a representative voting member. And whoever comes into her role next year will also agree to continue to be the NDSA representative voting member. Terence, for example, is studying at a larger polytechnic institute. He thinks that he can work to form a Disabled Students Association, but this might take some time. And so he's talked to disability services staff, and they've agreed with the NDSA that Terence would be an awesome representative voting member for the NDSA. So he'll work together with us as a representative voting member and with his local institution to form a group. And then next year, or when that association forms, they will then become the member of the NDSA. So if that organisation forms, Terence will no longer be a voting member. If he's a part of that new organisation, though, he can still vote as a representative for that organisation. If he isn't a part of that new organisation, he might decide that he wants to become an independent member to keep up with our activities and keep in contact. So an independent member is a non-voting member. That's someone who can still attend most of our members' council. They can attend other events that we hold, but they just don't have voting rights. And so they're still there to play an important advisory role. They're just not able to vote on matters. And so this talks about voting members again. This is different to independent members who do not represent organisation and observing members. There we go. So those observing members and independent members are both classes of non-voting members. We then have 20 in which we will link to the relevant policies once they're up. And so I hope this helps somewhat, especially because I'm aware that it's a really big wall of text. And so I'm hoping this kind of conversational style might help a little bit in understanding what the agreement is. And so that we can hopefully come to a decision as to whether these suit our members. If you've got feedback, please do let me know. There are ways in which you can give feedback. So we have a membership agreement form for feedback. And this one, it more specifically talks about certain sections with a bit of a plain language translation as to how things are. And that's largely because those are the main sections that affect you. But obviously, if there's other parts and you've got further thoughts, you're more than welcome to give us feedback on those. We will also have a doc version of this that you'll be able to access that I will try and link in the YouTube video as well. And you can download this form and fill it out on your computer, and you can upload it and send it back to us. And that's the same version as this form, but it's on a blue background so that it's a little bit easier for some folks to read. Unfortunately, Google Forms just does not give us that option, and we are currently working on better processes to have better, more accessible forms. We expect this to come out, these processes to come out around when our new website comes out, which is exciting, and I will give you a sneak peek once we're nearing those stages of being able to actually complete it. But that's all for now, and please do let me know if you've got any views or perspectives that you'd like to share. If you think it's just fine and you're ready to sign them now, let me know and I can get those out to you.